My name is Brian Benz. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and you can reach me on Twitter at bbenz and look me up on LinkedIn as well. Happy to link with you there. Today we're going to talk about, as was mentioned, deploying to the cloud with GitHub Actions. We're going to cover GitHub Actions, feature flags, blue-green deployments, and A/B testing. If you don't know what those things are, don't worry. I will cover them in the presentation. So for those of you who want to follow along, oh, by the way, I'm going to give like a brief introduction on PowerPoint, and then we're going to move to slides, and we're going to mostly be demos in this. So don't worry too much. It's more of demo than a lecture. So this is part of the DevOps for Java Shop series that I put together, and you can find a GitHub repo with all the samples and instructions on how to follow along and recreate the demos that I'm going to show today at aka.ms/DevOps for Java Shops. So I'm going to cover four things. What is DevOps? I'm going to do DevOps with GitHub. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to have the demo, as I mentioned, is going to be most of the presentation. And I'm going to talk about how you can keep your investments, because a lot of folks already have investments in the cloud, and they have investments in DevOps tools and technologies. And I'm going to show you how you can actually keep those and just make them better with the things I'm going to show you today. So what is DevOps? We'll start with that so everyone's on the same page. DevOps, this is a great quote from a colleague of mine, Donovan Brown, here at Microsoft. DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value. And what does that mean? It's just important that you don't rely 100% on the technology to do the work for you. The people have to be able to understand their roles in the larger organization and in the project that you're building. The process has to support those people, and the products need to support the process and the people. And it has to all deliver value. If you're not delivering value, there's no point in investing, because you do have to invest time and money and effort in building a DevOps infrastructure. But if it's not adding value to whatever you're doing in your organization, then definitely need to rethink that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about people, process, and products. Here's some of the things you hear on a typical software development project and in an organization in general. Works on my machine. Who's supporting what? Where's my code? And that could be, where's my code in general, or where's the code that you were promised? And can I get an update? Can I get an update on the project, on the timeline? Are we on track? Is there an update to the software that I can try out? All kinds of things. And then how is the timeline is very important as well. Are we delivering on time? Are we going to be able to promise or deliver what we promised back, a year ago or a month ago for whatever the new feature is of the process? So these are the things you hear. And how do you actually make sure that you can answer all these questions? And that comes down to process. So this is a typical software development lifecycle where you're planning, you're developing and testing, and then you're releasing, and then you're going to monitor and learn. And that last part, the fourth part, generally gets overlooked. And that's really important, because quite often, you'll have people in your organization or your project delivering requests to you about what should be built. How do you make sure that what you were requested to build is actually what was delivered? That's monitoring and learning. So you have to be able to build and test and deliver things, and then make sure that they actually do the job they were intended to do. And that's where things like A/B testing that I mentioned, and feature flags and blue-green deployments come in. And I'll explain what those are a little bit later. But those are the kinds of things you need. So the process itself has to be understood by everyone, and everyone needs to know their place in the process. So the people in the process, and those are supported by products. So the products themselves at Microsoft, I'm going to talk about those. We've got GitHub for storing your repos and running actions, which actually do deployments and things like that. We've got Visual Studio, which is our paid developer environment. And we also have Visual Studio Code, which is a free open source text editor, which I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you this thing called Code Spaces. Code Spaces is a version of Visual Studio Code that is actually running in the cloud. It runs on what they call hosted runners at GitHub, and it works with your repos directly from your repos. So we'll show you a little bit about that after. Delivering, we've got Azure pipelines, GitHub extensions, and GitHub Actions. And I'm going to highlight GitHub Actions today. And then managing the security. Microsoft literally spends billions of dollars a year on security. I've been at Microsoft for 10 years almost. And when I started at Microsoft, we had a lot of customers and prospects who would come to us and say, we can't put our stuff on the cloud. We have to be able to manage our security. And since then, the security landscape has changed, and quite often it's difficult for a internal security shop to keep ahead of all the threats that are out there. So they are now changing their mind. They used to say, well, we can't put our stuff on the cloud. We have to manage security. Now they're like, we have to put our stuff on the cloud because we can't invest in what we need to manage security. And the cloud has more features for that. So we have Azure Monitor, which is a way to monitor your applications in general. We've got policies, which enforce compliance policies in your organization. We've got automation and security center. So security center, we spend literally billions of dollars a year on security, and we keep things up to date. And we notify you of things going wrong with your applications and things that might affect you depending on the workloads that you're running on your applications as well. With respect to privacy as well. We don't go in and analyze anything other than we know that you're running, for example, Java or we're something like that. And we make sure that you know if there is a threat to Java out there in the world, not just on our cloud, but in the world, we'll make sure you're notified about it. So those are the products. Let's talk about how we deliver these things with Azure. And then we're going to get straight into the demo. So we have GitHub Actions. We have Azure Boards, which is like Kanban boards. We also have Azure Pipelines, which is a full DevOps, multi-stage, multi-environment deployment environment that you can use, and that's for building and deploying. And then we have Azure Artifacts and Azure Test Plans. So Azure Artifacts are a way to manage, in the case of Java, your Maven and Maven artifacts, for example. Any kind of artifacts you have that you need to store for auditing and compliance purposes, and just for speed in general, you can store them in Azure Artifacts. So they're safe there, and you can roll back if needed, or you can analyze it to see what kind of threats you have. Azure Test Plans are a way to test your applications through load testing or website testing as well. But we're going to focus on GitHub today. We're going to focus on GitHub Actions and the difference between GitHub Actions and extensions. Actions are written in scripts. You can find actions at the GitHub Action Marketplace if you just search that. GitHub extensions are slightly different, and they're sort of not as covered as actions are. They don't get this much press, but they're pretty cool too. These are third-party tools. They're not open source, but they're third-party tools that are written that allow you to integrate with things. So adding pretty much any kind of software that you can imagine to your workflow for deployments can use GitHub extensions. We have integration with Azure and other clouds. I'm going to show Azure deployments today. You can do the same thing with other clouds as well. And we have integration with popular IDEs, including IntelliJ, Eclipse, and of course, Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. And one of the things that Microsoft did, actually, there was a lot of concern in the community when Microsoft bought GitHub. We've actually opened up a lot of things. So private repos used to be, the GitHub charged for them. And now, as part of Microsoft, private repos are free, and they're also free for teams to a certain point as well. So check that out. And I'm going to show you code spaces today, which is pretty cool. All right. So GitHub, a little bit about them. Everyone knows about this. They're a large platform. We have a lot of customers. The idea with GitHub, though, is you've got a fully managed developer environment that's actually built in, not just a place to store your code, but now you have code spaces, which allows you to do powerful deployments as well. I'll talk about this a little bit. So we got flexible CI/CD with Actions. Most people are familiar with Actions now, so I usually just skip over this slide. And we have a lot of actions that are built. Any kind of crazy idea you have about building a GitHub action, you can probably find some aspect of that on the GitHub Marketplace. So check that out and you'll find it. GitHub Mobile has mobile. This is really cool. So actually I logged into GitHub the other day, and I usually use a different authentication method for logging into GitHub to verify that it's me. And now the GitHub mobile app does it. So if you have the GitHub mobile app and you're logged into the GitHub mobile app, if you log into GitHub and you're not logged in, it will actually tell you, okay, go to your GitHub mobile app and verify that this is you. So it's kind of cool. They've added new features. That's a new feature they just added this week. And they add new features all the time. And you can do a lot of different things with GitHub mobile. Code spaces. So I started to talk about code spaces. This is really cool stuff. You're going to see. I'll show you this, but basically it's a way to open up a developer environment straight from the GitHub repo. It clones the repo. It's not, you're not editing directly the repo, which is still good software common sense. And then you push back to the repo from the code space. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And let's do the demo. Okay, so what I'm going to show you today is a really simple Spring Boot application. And we can follow up with any questions you have about the DevOps stuff after. But I want to get to this demo. All right. So the first thing I want to show you, this is my Azure portal. So the Azure portal itself is a way to organize your work that you're doing every day in the cloud. Anyone who has a Azure account has probably recognized this. You can also use the Azure CLI and things like that, but the Azure portal is a great way to just sort of visually organize and show things. So this is why I do it for demos. All my dashboards, you can create custom dashboards, are built for demos, for presentations, and projects I'm working on. And you can customize those for whatever you need for your organization. This is a resource group. So if I zoom out a little bit, this is what a resource group looks like in a visual representation in the Azure portal. And these are the resources I have in the resource group. This is going to become important because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new website using Azure Web Apps. I'm going to clone it from a repo, and then I'm going to use a GitHub Action to build it and deploy it. So it's going to be created using this resource group in here. Over here, I've got some custom links in a markdown file, and this is something called app configuration, which is the feature flags that is in the title of my presentation. All right, so let's get I'm going to show you what the application looks like when we're done first. So I'm going to show you, this is the final application. It's a silly little application, and it's a Spring Boot app, and it's enabled with this thing called feature flags. There's some code already hidden in this application that can be enabled and disabled using feature flags. That's what feature flags are. For this, we use something called app configuration. Sorry if that's small. I don't know if I can make it bigger. Yeah, I can. So app configuration is what the tool that Microsoft has created to manage feature flags. And the way you manage feature flags is you go down to your feature manager and you literally just turn them on and off. The feature flag I'm going to use today is called beta. You can update that feature flag, and what happens is now something has changed in this application. There you go. So we've got our developer advocate named Bit. He's a developer advocate mascot at Microsoft, and that's our feature. I've basically written some code in that application that shows him or doesn't show him, depending on if this feature flag is updated or not. And it usually takes a few seconds for him to go away once I do that. But I didn't reboot the code. I didn't redeploy the code. I just had to turn off and turn on Bit. There he is. He's gone. So the idea here is you can create something inside of your application using the feature flags that you can try out with different people. So that's called A/B testing. So when you do application testing, you can have half the people see the new feature, in this case Bit, and half the people see the old features. So the way you do that is in Configuration Manager. I've got this one here. If I go into Configuration Explorer, you'll see, hey, what happened? I can do this. I can go here. I got to make this smaller so I can see everything. There it is. And then edit. So in here, what I've got is I've got a custom percentage. And the percentage allows a certain percentage of the people to actually see this application. So if I go back into the advanced editor for that, feature manager, advanced edit, you'll see some JSON here, or you should see, there it is. So the JSON here is probably better explains what we're doing. So we've got an ID here. The Microsoft percentage is a setting. The value is 50, means 50% of the people can see that bit if I enable this feature flag, and 50% can't. So that's what A/B testing is. And then what you do with A/B testing is you monitor what the behavior is of users when they see the new feature. Are they using it? Are they using it the way you expected? Is it actually giving the results that you expected? So that's the feature manager in a nutshell. You can create a new feature and just call it Cloud Builders. And down here, you can apply it. All right. And then from there, anyway, the idea is you can edit this. Why does it say no label? I don't know why it says no label. Something wrong with it. There's a bug. Let's refresh that. Okay, there we go. Cloud Builders. Thank you. All right, let me get over here. Let me make that small again. And edit. So I can go in here and I can edit this, and you can use a feature filter. So I can either just turn it on or off, which is simple, or you can use a feature filter. Targeting means you can have certain regions that see this. Time window means you can just do, display it for the weekend or a certain period of time. And custom allows you to do the percentage. So you can do percentage and other things as well. So there's different flexibility you have with features using the feature flag. That's all. So I just wanted to highlight that. That's A/B testing in a nutshell. There's other ways to do it as well, and I'll highlight some of those in a little bit. I also talked about blue-green deployments in my title. So blue-green deployments is where you've got a feature, you want to roll it out, but you don't want to just bring the site down and then add the new feature and bring it up again. You want to just roll it out gradually. You're going to roll it out. It's not an A/B test because you're not, an A/B test, you're not sure if you're going to implement the feature. So you're testing it to see if it does what you expect. Blue-green deployments is where you're actually deploying gradually. You have multiple servers or multiple app services on the cloud, and you're going to deploy out one at a time. So users are going to see a slightly different thing depending on where they're logged in and what server they're interacting with. But it's not going to roll back if everything goes well. Basically, you're just going to continue to roll it out gradually to all those different people. So that's the difference between blue-green deployments and A/B testing. All right. So we've seen the app. We've seen what it does, turns on and off. So I'm going to create a new app from scratch to show you how you do that in the cloud. And I'm going to use the cloud portal here. I could use the Azure CLI or something, but this is a nice visual representation. So these, as I mentioned before, this is my resource group, and these are all the resources I have in here. I have something called an app service plan, which is controlling the performance of all of these apps. And then I have all these app services, and the app services themselves are where the actual websites are. In this case, August Brown Bag is the website. I click here and I go to /welcome because it's a Spring Boot application, and you get the application. So you get the idea here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new web app inside of this resource group, and then I'm going to show you a few other things as well. So create a resource, and we're going to create a web app. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to use that resource group that I already have set up, DevOps for Java Shops. That's that square I showed you at the portal. And the web app name is going to be Cloud Builders. Can I spell it right? There we go. And we're going to publish code. We could also do a Docker container or a static web app. We're going to use, in this case, Java 11, but we could use Java 8. We've also got Node, PHP, Python, Ruby, and of course, .NET. We're going to use Java, and we could use for the web server stack, SC, Red Hat, Tomcat. Those are the three options you have. In the case of this, we're just going to use Java SC, which is the embedded web server. And we're going to use Linux for the operating system. We could use Windows. And I am going to, these are the regions we have. These are locations of our cloud centers all over the world. I'm going to use West US 2. And the reason why I'm using West US 2 is I already have an app service plan in there that covers this region. So that's that Java Shops app service plan I showed you earlier. So next we're going to go to deployment. And what are we going to deploy? In this case, we're going to enable continuous deployment. And we're going to use GitHub. We're going to actually go to GitHub. Here's the GitHub repo. Actually, that's not the repo. Hold on a second here. Dashboard. So the repo is called DevOps for Java Shops test feature flags. You can find it on my repo. As I mentioned before, if you go to aka.ms/DevOps for Java Shops, it has this repo in there with instructions on how to follow along. Okay, so this is the code for this. And basically what we're going to do here is we're going to link this web app to that code. And that's going to generate a GitHub action. And that GitHub action is going to be used for continuous deployment. So we're going to select the organization, in this case, be Benz. We're going to load the repo, and the repo is DevOps for Java Shops test feature flags. That's the one I just showed you. And we're just going to use the main branch, and it creates a GitHub action for you. And here's the GitHub action itself. I'll explain what this is in a little while, but basically this is the YAML file that's going to be for the GitHub action. Then we go to networking. We can set up a proxy if we want to. We don't want to. And then we can enable application insights. And for the purposes of a demo, I'm not going to do that because it takes a little while. And then I'm going to create the web app. So it's going to check it out. It's going to give me a summary of what I want to build. And then I say create. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to create the web app, but it's also going to go into that repo. And it's going to do two things. It's going to send a token because I logged in. I was already authenticated between Azure and GitHub. It's going to send a token to my GitHub repo that can be used with this web app because that's for security. You don't want just anyone being able to access your new web app, and you don't want anyone to be able to deploy to it from GitHub. So you need that token that links things between each other. It's also going to create a GitHub action. And it's going to lie in a minute. It's going to tell me that the deployment is in progress and the deployment succeeded. There you go. Deployment succeeded. Totally lie. It did succeed technically, but it's not running. It won't work. I can go to this resource and it won't run. It's going to give me an error. It's going to tell me, hey, Java developers, this is the screen you get when you don't have any code in your application. So it's really important to have code in your application. Let's go in and I'll show you where that is. Let's go into the GitHub repo. And if I go into actions, this action is actually going to fail. And there's a good reason why it fails. The feature flag manager that I showed you earlier requires a connection string. There we go. It failed. So the connection string has to be built into your GitHub action. You need to have that connection. So this is a demo that I like to show because I can show a hello world where everything's perfect and it works, but it's not connected to anything. And that's just not the way the real world works. Pretty much any application you have needs a connection to something. So in this case, this application needs a connection to feature flags. It's going to tell me that it failed because it couldn't find a resource that it needs inside the build log and in the build with Maven. And that's because, well, I won't go into all the logs. It's not enough time for that. But the build itself failed because it couldn't find a connection to that string. So we could go into our application itself. We could go to the GitHub workflow, And this is the Cloud Builders YAML file we've got here. And I can edit this, right? So I can edit it right here, edit this file, but that's terrible developer workflow, and it's just not common sense for Agile or any other methodology. So what you want to do is you want to clone this repo, and you want to make a change to it and then push it back up just in case anyone else is working on it. So you have that full Git process enabled. And so to do that, we're going to use code spaces. So if I go back to the repo, I could do a clone, just like you normally do. I could do a clone here, clone it locally. I could edit it with Visual Studio Code or something else and add that connection string we need. Or I can go into code spaces here and I can create a new code space. And this opens a new tab in the browser. It's going to set up a code space for me. Dun, dun, dun. And what this does is it actually clones the repo. So I'm not going to be working with the repo. Even though I just pressed a button in the repo, I'm not working with the repo. I'm working with a clone in Visual Studio, in a browser, and you can use extensions, by the way. There we go, right on cue. Over here on the right, it says extension pack for Java extension is recommended for this repository. Do I want to install it? And that's because it's detected that this is a Java application. But I don't want to install it. If I wanted to, I could install that, and then I can save this environment with the Java pack, the extension pack for Java created in this thing called a dev container. Then anyone else who creates or edits this can use that dev container already with the Java or anything else I need pre-installed, any other extensions, and work with it that way. It's a great way to manage compliance with your application, so you can force people to use a certain dev container or pre-built environment to actually build your application. In this case, what we want to do is we just want to edit that GitHub workflow. So if I go into GitHub workflows and I go into Cloud Builders YAML, here it is. I need to put something here, which is a feature flag. If I look at the OG brown bag, which is the one that works, I've already got it. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy the whole thing, not forget the E. Okay, so what happens here, let me zoom in. So this is the connection string information, and I'm just going to add it here. All right. And when I save this, I'm going to push it, and then I'm going to show you what all this does. So don't worry if you're not clear on what the GitHub Action does or the what I just posted here. I'm going to explain that in a minute, but I'm going to do it while this is running. All right. So then the source control is activated over on the left here. For those of you, there you go. So the source control on the left here tells me that there's one file that's been changed, and do I want to update it? Yep. So builders in hey. Okay, so we're going to commit this. It's going to tell me it's not staged. So you want to stage it? Yes, because I'm lazy. I just did it this way. And then I can sync changes. This is going to do a push and a pull. It's going to do a push and a pull to that repo. And no, I don't want to do git fetch. And what that's going to do, so this is the Visual Studio code space. I'm going to go back to the repo over in this tab. And then the actions, this should have, yeah, so there you go. So it's actually enabled another action. So this one's going to build and it's going to deploy, but it's still not going to work. And if anyone can guess why, I'll tell you. What it is that you have that connection string in your YAML file for your GitHub Action now. So it builds and it deploys, but you haven't added the connection string to that brand new application that you created, the web app. So it's still going to fail, but I'll fix that in a second. Let's talk about where everything is. So, oops, I spelled Cloud Builder wrong. Anyway, whatever. Doesn't matter. So I added this string, this env connection string. So where is that? If I go into my repo and I go into settings and I go into secrets, two things are there now. Secrets, actions, there you go. So inside the actions, that's the app configuration connection string. If you clone this repo and you go into settings secrets, you won't see that because that's my connection string to my feature manager. You would have to create one on your own. And also, this is the token that was just updated 7 minutes ago. This is the token that talks to the Azure web app. And that's the connection that you need between the Azure web app. So if we go into the code space itself, let's talk about what this thing does. We'll actually go in there. So basically, this is the generated YAML with my addition of the secret. There's a name, there's add the environment variable that you need. And then anytime there's a push on the main branch, it's going to trigger two jobs, a build job and a deploy job. So the build job runs on Ubuntu. It checks out the code. So it doesn't use the code directly, it clones it. And then it sets up the Java version, which I specified as 11. It does a Maven clean install. And then it builds a jar file and it deposits that jar file somewhere where the deployment job can pick it up. So the deployment job then runs on something else. And it builds, it needs a build. So the build has to have succeeded in order for the deployment to run. And then you download the artifact that was created by the build job, and you deploy it to the web app. And it uses the same secrets reference, but this time it's referencing a token, a published profile that we're using, and it deploys a jar file. So one thing I want to mention, where does this all run? So it runs on these things called Azure hosted runners, or actually, no, GitHub hosted runners, sorry. And the GitHub hosted runners, if I look over here, the hosted runners themselves have a whole bunch of software. Let me see here, hosted runner environments. So if you go in here, you can see the actual open source of the environments, and you can find there's literally thousands of packages that are built on these repos. These are open source, and you can list them and find out what's in each one of these. But basically, whenever I say run on a GitHub action, or anyone does, it uses one of these images. It creates a container on a hosted runner on GitHub using virtual machines on Azure, and then it just runs and builds these things. All right, so that's in a nutshell what's happening there when you click on the actions. Let's go back to the action itself. Where is that now? Desk feature flags. Let's go into actions. So this one's going to tell me it succeeded. All right, so the build, we got plenty of time here. So we got, all right, so this build succeeded. And it went through and it created a job, actions, checks out. It basically mirrors everything that you saw on the application itself. And then it did a deployment. And the deployment itself set up the job, grabbed the artifact, and deployed it. And it deployed it to here. But the application is still not going to be working. And that is because, all right, so there's an application error. And that is because we don't have the connection string set up. Now, here's a little tip with web apps. Cloud builders, if you add a .scm at the right place in this URL, cloudbuilders.scm.azurewebsites.net, it actually gives you a little environment. So the web app is a software as a service. You're not really supposed to do a lot of manipulation in here, but you can have enough information here to figure out if something actually happened. And I can go in here and I can see the app.jar got deployed. So it was built, it was deployed, it made it here, but it's still not running. Why isn't it running? Okay, so that's because that app configuration connection string needs to be set up. So if I go back in here, to the application itself. So this one's called Cloud Builders or Fresh. Cloud Builders, where is it? There it is. Okay, so there's the app service. It's running, everything's fine, the app deployed, but we need to set up that connection string. And you do that through configuration. And like I say, this is a good demo because it shows you how you have to do things, which I think is a good idea for configuring an application that's not a standalone application. It's a real application with different things. In this case, we want to put an environment variable in there, and we use application settings for that. And we say app configuration connection string. We put the connection string in there. Don't look. And basically from there, remember to save. I don't always do that. I can save that. Now it's going to update the web app. It's going to reboot the web app, basically. It doesn't actually technically reboot it. What it does is it takes the code and shifts it to a new web app and fires it up. So it's a little faster to do that. That's what it does behind the scenes. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so now if we go into Cloud Builders, and go into cloudbuilders.azurewebsites.net, we should see a better error message now. Welcome. No, come on. This is probably caching. So let me close this. Cloud Builders of azurewebsites.net. Nope, we're still seeing the bad one. Oh no. I don't know why. I guess it hasn't restarted yet. Let me just make sure I did the right one. Configuration. Connection string. Yeah, it's there. And it's got the right one. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Overview. I don't know. I'm going to guess this just hasn't started yet. There's caching involved. I don't know why it's not working. Huh. Let me restart that application again. I got to get this working. Got to get it working. All right. Yeah, I want to restart the application. I saved it, right? Yeah, I did save it. Successfully restart a web app. Okay, let's go in and see what happens. No, still not going to do it. Huh. All right. Well, I'm gonna figure out why that didn't deploy, but you got the idea. It deployed, and it should look like this. This is what the original application looks like. I don't know why. It's taking some time maybe to restart that application now. I don't know why. But anyway, a couple things I want to show you in the slides, and then and like I say, you can follow along and see that app. I've done it many times. I'm not sure why it didn't show. Usually it shows pretty quick. Okay, so if you're already invested in DevOps, I did promise I was going to mention this, you can keep your investments. And the way you do that is because we work with all these people. If you're using Jenkins, which a lot of Java people are, we have plugins and add-ons and extensions that you can work with Jenkins in your workflow. We also have tons of Jenkins-based application GitHub Actions in the GitHub Action Marketplace, and you can actually use Azure DevOps and link directly to Jenkins as well. That's just one example, but we work with all these tools. So I talked about what is DevOps. DevOps is with GitHub, DevOps in action, and keep your investments. Don't forget, you can follow along and you can recreate the demos that I showed here, and they will work at this URL, aka.ms/DevOps for Java shops. And my name is Brian Benz. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and you can find me on Twitter at bbenz. Please do follow me, and thanks. I guess I'll take some questions, and I'm going to check back on that app and see if it's working yet.
Brian, thank you very much. It was pretty funny demo. Actually, though, the open source community had a lot of concerns when Microsoft acquired GitHub. It's great to see that GitHub is still really great software platform to storing software projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's working now, by the way. If you want to show my screen again, it just took a second. So yeah, it's anyway, it's working again. I don't know if you want to show my screen or not. I don't see it showing here, but yeah, there it is. Okay, so there it is. Cloudbuilders.azurewebsites.net is actually working, and the feature flag would work as well. So I just want to show it would actually work. So sorry, I'll take some questions now.
Great. I'm afraid we don't have, but we ran out of time. But thank you for this session. It was funny. It was with great energy, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Great. Well, thanks. Like I say, you can aka.ms/DevOps for Java shops. You can check it out. You can recreate it. And I'd like to work with speakers who want to present this in their native languages. So if you want to do that, do reach out to me as well, and I can help you facilitate that. Thanks.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for support to Ukraine, and have a nice day.